Okay, hello everyone. Okay, so the next program in chapter 4 is calculating the factorial of a number. Okay, so in mathematics, the notation n factorial represents the factorial of the non-negative integer n. The factorial of n is the product of all the non-negative integers from 1 to n. For example, 7 factorial is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7, which gives you 5040. So 7 factorial is 5040. And 4 factorial is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4, which gives you 24. So 4 factorial is 24. Write a program that lets the user enter a non-negative integer and then uses a loop to calculate the factorial of that number. Display the factorial. Okay, so we're basically going to specify a number, and the program is going to allow the user to enter, let's say, a number. So the user enters, let's say, 7. And the program should basically do this calculation and print out the factorial of 7, which is 5040, or the factorial of 4 if the user typed in 4, which is 24. So let's start. All right, so it says write a program that lets the user enter a non-negative integer. Okay, so let's start with that. Write a program that lets the user enter a non-negative integer. So we know that whatever number the user types has to be a positive number. Okay, so I'm going to ask the user using the input function for a number. Okay, and then we're going to check to see if that number is a positive number. If not, we're going to keep on asking the user to enter a positive number. Okay, so I'm going to call the input function here, and I'm going to ask the user to please enter a number. And now by default, the input function always returns a string. Even if the user, since we are asking the user to enter a number, the user will enter a number. Now, even if the user enters a number, because by default the input function always returns a string, we need to convert it to a number so we can use it. Because if the user enters a number and it returns that number as a string, we can't use that number in calculations. We can't, or we can't use it in the way we want to use it in this program. So we have to figure out a way to convert that number that is being returned as a string to a number. Now, by default, that's how the input function works. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert whatever is going to be returned, okay, by this input function to an integer, because I want it as a number. I want it as an integer. In this case, we're dealing with integers here. So to do that, I'm going to call the int function, type in int, and surround everything that the user has typed with parentheses. So I'm converting everything that the user has typed over here into an integer. And when I do that, I need a place to store it. I need a variable to store it in. So I'm going to basically create a variable. I'm going to call it user integer. And I'm going to store whatever the user typed using the input function, convert it to an integer in user integer. Okay. So now I'll have the user integer. Now let's check to see if the value that the user typed is a positive number. So I'm going to create a while loop here and say while the user integer is less than, now I don't want to accept 0 too, because if the user types in 0 factorial, we know it's 0. I don't want that. So you can include 0 if you want, but I don't want to include 0. Okay, so while the user integer is less than 1, anything less than 1, keep on asking the user to enter a positive number. Now I can even change the message this time around. We can say, so while the user number is less than 0, while the user integer is less than 1, okay, if it's 0, -1, negative, anything less than 1, keep on asking the user to enter the number again, or enter a positive number. So I'm going to basically copy this line, print it here again, change the message a little bit and say, please enter a positive number. Positive number, please. So the messages are different. The first time it says enter a number. If you don't enter a number, it says now. If you don't enter a positive number, it says please enter a positive number, please. All right. So, and it's going to store the value. If the user enters a number again, it's going to store the value that the user entered in user integer. It's going to check user integer again to see if it's less than 1. If it's less than 1, it's going to keep asking the user. If it's not less than 1, it's going to bypass this while loop or jump out of this while loop and continue the code that's below this while loop that we're about to write. So if it's not less than 1, that means It's either 1 or above. So, okay, so we can work with it. So now let's go ahead and calculate the factorial. So we know that the factorial is basically starting from 1 all the way to the number we're multiplying all the numbers together. So let's create a loop starting from 1 all the way to 7. So I'm going to go ahead and create, oh no, not all the way to 7. Now 7 is, for example, assuming the user typed in 7. So we are starting from 1 all the way to the number the user typed. So from 1 all the way to user integer. Okay. Now it says the factorial of n is the product of all the non-negative integers from 1 to n. N in this case is our user integer. So let's create a loop starting from 1 all the way to the user integer. So for let's see, I'm going to say for current number, I'm going to create a range here. In range, I'm going to start from 1 all the way to the user integer plus 1. The reason why I added plus 1 was because if I just did 1 to user integer, it will basically, for example, they typed in 7 as the user integer. If I did 1 to 7, it's basically going to give me a range from 1 to 6. This ending limit is not included. This is always the starting limit. 1 is always the starting limit. But 7 is the ending limit, basically not included. So this is going to give me a range from 1 to 6. So I always have to add plus 1 to this, which is going to give me 1 to 8. And because 8, the ending limit is not included, it's going to give me a range from 1 to 7. So you always have to add 1 to the ending limit. Okay, because the ending limit you type itself is not included. Okay, so create a loop, start from 1 all the way to the user integer plus 1. Okay, just so we can cover the whole range. And each time we want to basically start calculating the factorial. Now, I'm going to initialize factorial with a variable, or with a value 1. Oops, no semicolon. I'm going to initialize factorial with 1. And what I want to do is, each time I want to multiply whatever number I get in current number. So basically this loop is going to iterate, okay, or basically start from 1 all the way to the user integer, right? So the user types in, let's say, 7. We are starting from 1 to 7. What is going to happen is, the first time the loop iterates, current number is going to hold 1. The second time the loop iterates, current number is going to hold 2. The third time the loop iterates, current number is going to hold 3, all the way to the user integer. So each time this loop iterates, we want to go ahead and multiply. So for example, the first time we're going to multiply 1 to what's already stored in factorial, and then store the result in factorial. So each time this loop iterates, we want to go ahead and multiply the current number with what's already stored in the current number and store the result in the current number. So sorry, I made a mistake. I meant factorial. All right. So what I wanted to say was this. I messed it up over there. All right, what I wanted to say was this. Each time this loop iterates, we are multiplying the current number with what's already stored in factorial, not the current number. Okay, we are multiplying, each time this loop iterates, we are multiplying the current number with what's already stored in factorial, and then storing the result of that multiplication in factorial. Okay, now that's what I wanted to say. Each time the loop iterates, we're multiplying the current number with what's already stored in factorial and storing the result in factorial. So factorial, okay, is going to be equal to what's already stored in factorial times the current number. So what's going to happen is this. For example, assuming the user typed in 7, this loop is going to start from 1 to 7. Factorial already holds 1. So it's going to be equal to 1 times 1, because we know we're starting from 1 to 7. So the first time it's going to be 1, because factorial holds 1, times 1, because we're starting the current number with 1. And it's going to store the results in factorial, which is 1. The second time it iterates, it's going to be 1 times 2 because current number has been increased to 2. 1 times 2 gives you 2, and it's going to store 2 here. And then the third time, current number is going to increase to 3. Now factorial holds 2. So it's going to be 2 times 3, which is going to be equal to 6, and 6 is going to be stored in factorial. And on and on and on. So we know that by initializing factorial to 1, we are multiplying first of all by 1, multiplying by 2, multiplying the results by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, by 7, and storing the results in factorial each time. Now, this statement, you can also write it as factorial multiplication equals current number. So we are multiplying factorial by the current number. Okay, we are multiplying factorial by current number. Okay, what we are multiplying factorial by is current number. Or you can say factorial. Yeah, it's fine. It's the same thing. I was going to repeat it. All right. So you can write it that way, or you can leave it this way if you want. Now, I didn't initialize factorial to 0 because now what is going to happen is factorial is going to hold, it's always going to hold 0. Any number multiplied by 0 is 0. So it's going to be 0 times current number, which is 1, gives you 0. 0 is stored here. Factorial will always hold 0. Okay, 0 times current number, which is going to be incremented by 1, so it's going to go to 2. 2 times 0, 0. Okay, 0 times 3, 0. 0 times 4, 0. 0 times 5, 0. So factorial always holds 0. But if I set it to 1, I'm multiplying 1 by the current number, which is starting from 1. So 1 times 1, 1. And then factorial holds 1. 1 times 2, because current number is incremented by 1, so it's 2. So 1 times 2, 2. 2 times 3, 6. Okay. 6 times 4, 20. So basically, it keeps on multiplying factorial, what's already stored in factorial, by the current number. And that's what we're doing here. If you think about it, we're starting 1 times 1. Well, we don't have to do that. It's basically, we don't have to do that. But 1 times 1 always gives you 1. And that's why I started it with 1. So we are multiplying 1 by current number goes up by 2. So it's 2 here. And the result is stored in factorial. Now the result of this is multiplied by 3. Then the result of this is multiplied by 4. The result of this is multiplied by 5. The result of this is multiplied by 6. And that's what we're doing. What's already stored in factorial is going to be the result. And then we're multiplying by the next number, the next current number, or basically the current number. And we are storing the results in factorial. So by the time this is done, we'll have the factorial in the variable factorial. And then all we have to do is just print it out. So I'm going to go ahead and write a print function. I'll call the print function and pass in a couple of arguments. I'll say the first argument is going to be a string. I'll say the factorial of. The second argument is going to be user integer, the factorial of user integer. The third argument is, fourth argument is going to be factorial. Now by default, anytime you pass in arguments into the print function this way, using commas, by default they are printed with a space separating them. So this is going to read the factorial of space user integer space is space factorial. So by default, it's printed like that. All right, so let's save this and run it and see what happens. So save selected files. I'm going to save it where I normally save all the Python files. And then I'll create a folder for this one. I'll call it, this is a long name, calculating the factorial of a number, right? So let's see. I personally don't mind typing the full name. If you want, you can make it short. Calculating the factorial of a number. Now that's a long one, but it doesn't matter. It still works. Okay, but you can make it short if you want. And then I'll save this also the same way. Calculating the factorial of a number .py. Then I'll save it here. Now let's see what happens. Now I'm going to enter the same values they use here, 7, and hit enter. Now you can see the factorial of 7 is 5040. We can try again and see, test for the 4, factorial of 4, and we should expect 24, right? So 4, say the factorial of 4 is 24. Now it's working. I just want to separate out the question and answer, basically the input and output with a new line. So this is where I'm asking the question. This is where I'm asking the user to type in the number, and this is where it's printing out the result. Now, what I can do is, if I want, I can. Let's see. If I want, I can, before this is printed, I can just go ahead and create a new line character here by typing \n. Now \n is is the new line character. Both characters together is a new line character. When you type in the \, it starts an escape sequence, meaning it's waiting for one of the escape characters to cause something to happen. N is one of the escape characters that when it follows, for example, the \, it creates something to happen. In this case, it creates a new line character. So basically, \n together is a new line character. And what that does is, it takes the position to the next line, and anything that comes after the new line character is displayed on that next line. So by typing in \n, you're creating a new line, and then anything that comes after the new line, after the \n is displayed on that new line. So when I run this and I type in 4, now we can see that new line has been created because of the \, because the position was moved from here to here, and anything that came after the new line, which is the factorial of basically this whole print statement, is displayed on that next line. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is, so I'm going to delete this, and now we're back to where we were. Okay, we're back to where we were. I typed in 24. Okay, so another way to do it is, you can, let's see. Yeah, we're back to where we were. Yep. Another way to do it is, you can basically, so anytime you type in the print function this way, and you tell the program to basically print out something like this. When I run this program, and I type in, let's say 20, or let's say 4. Now it's going to go ahead and print out what I told it to print. It's going to print out what I told it to print before printing out the factorial. So it's going to do exactly what I told it to do. It's going to print out that statement, that string. And by default, the print function, ends with a new line character. So anytime you told it to print something, it's going to go ahead and print what you've told it to print and take the cursor to the next line. By default, that's how it works. That's how the print function works. After it's printed out what you've told it to print, it's going to take the cursor to the next line, and then anything that comes after this print statement is going to follow it is going to follow this on that next line here. Now that's by default how the print function works. Now, so if you call the print function and pass in nothing, now you're still calling the print function, but this time around you're telling it to print nothing. So it's going to print nothing here, but still by default it always ends the print function. The print function always ends with a new line character, meaning it always takes the position to the next line after you've called the print function. By default, that's how it works by default. But this time it's going to print out nothing over here, nothing here, but it's still going to take the cursor to the next line, or basically the position to the next line here. So anything that comes after this print function here, which prints nothing. Anything that comes after that is going to be displayed on that next line, because by default the print function ends with a new line. So by calling the print function this way, you're basically creating a new line. So when I run this and I type in, let's say, which was 7, you can see that the new line has been created. We printed nothing with a new line, or basically the position moves to the next line. And the factorial of 7 is 5040. It's working. Let's test a couple more numbers and see. Let's try 10. Factorial of 10. You can see it's 3. Now the factorial can go up really fast. if I type in the factorial of 20, you can see it's really increasing. It's going up really fast. Of, let's say, 50, you can see it's really long, right? Try the factorial of 1,000, and you can see that it's a really long number. The factorial can go up really, really fast. Now, if you type in something like a factorial of 1,000, of a million, the program can crash. I mean, it will still work, but it can take forever to show up. So this is just a factorial of 1,000, and you can see that it's a lot. But if I type in a million, the program can either crash or take a long time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So 1 million, I hit enter. You can see it says, it's basically calculating it, right? But it's taking a long time to calculate it. Let me try it in the Python shell, and it should say that over here. So that was the previous program. All right, so enter a number. I'll type in 2, 3. And it says executing command. Please wait for result. Now you can wait for a long time. I typed in a million, and it's still calculating the million. It's still calculating the factorial of a million. And yeah. So let's see. All right. Okay, so yeah. So this program works. If you have any questions, please comment down below, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Have a great night. Have a good sleep. Have a nice time. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time with the next program. All right. Bye-bye.